Aye.
Are we ready, sir? This brings to order the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, April 25th, 2019. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 19th and March 28th. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Pending decisions. Case number 3010, McDonald's USA. Is there a motion to,
I move we accept the decision as written.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Alrighty, do this before I forget. Pending decision 3030, Redcraft LLC. Is there a motion?
I move we accept the decision as written.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And aye.
You want red crap?
Redcraft, yes.
I got one here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here you go, Don.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you.
I'm skipping the next one. Number 3029, Albanese, to amend the
Move we accept the
prior.
decision as written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye. There is a discussion to reopen 3034. New information was submitted.
You need a motion on that?
We do.
I move we reopen that case.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. In that case, I think it'd be fair to hear 3034 first.
Good evening. My name is Frank Eisler. I'm the attorneys for the applicant. As you may know from the last work session, we had made, at your request, some changes to the plan and specifications that were before you at the work session. We reduced the height of the storage area of the garage to 6 feet 11 to be under 7 feet tall. Show on the plans the staircase that goes up to that area, and we removed from the plans any reference to heat in the garage. The plans have been reviewed by the building inspector. He determined that they're compliant. There's no need for any other variances, which was kind of what was being looked at last time. So we are seeking the same variances we heard at the public meeting, that were heard at the public meeting when we were last here. And, basically, we can stand on the record we made at that point, unless the board has questions or any concerns that you'd like us to address.
We have serious concerns about the height. We don't see any need for the height.
For the-
16 feet is the code, and I don't see any reason why it should be 32 or 31, whatever it is.
Well, would you like to address that, or?
I'm John Keane, Keane Development. I think as we explained last time, it's a very large house for building, and the intent was to keep it, design it more in keeping with the house, because it's going to look like two very small buildings right next to the house. And so it was really more for aesthetics than anything else.
This is totally self-imposed. In other words, you drew the house first, presumably, drew the garages, said, uh-oh, this is out of scale, we have to enlarge the garages. Well, you could have shrunken the house as well. So you chose this route. It's self-imposed.
And you haven't shown us anything at 16 foot to determine scale. You're saying it's out of scale, but I don't know if that's a fact.
Well, we can show you drawings of the,
I know there's a picture of a garage and there's a picture of a house, but I don't have any perspective of how it looks on the property. I just have a picture of a tall building of a tall garage.
well, as I said, we can show you drawings and pictures of the garage that was originally proposed. when we did the project, which were 16 feet. And that's when we started to study it better and do more models of it. It just appeared to be too small.
And if I may, just to address that, I happen to have represented the Old Town applications on the height of the buildings that are similar to this and that we're pointing to as a precedent for our application. When that actually there were three of them, when they all went through, we actually were before the ARB first. And the ARB made the determinations that you're talking about of the need to make the size comport of the accessory structure comport to the main structure. We then came to the zoning board. This time, we were told to come here first, and we've been carried on the ARB hearing schedule, and that would be an issue the ARB would address independent of the variance question as to the aesthetics of the garage that we're seeking.
Well, when they did the Old Town, that was a new subdivision. And I think we granted that because that was unique to that whole area of a new subdivision. And I think that we didn't, and we granted that because it could be unique to that, because we didn't want to have tall garages springing up on every lot all over the village of Southampton.
Sure.
And now you're asking to spring up a tall garage.
Now
in the village of
now
Southampton,
you're
so.
attributing a precedent to that case.
Well,
Yep,
I
you
think one of
called
the-
it a precedent.
right, well,
It's not a precedent.
I'm sorry, now, I won't call it a precedent, but one of the factors that your board considered when granting those variances was the size of the lot being 4 acres. And this parcel is 9 acres. And in our submittal that we made last public hearing, we brought up the fact that in considering the 5 factors for the area variance that we all must balance in determining whether or not to grant a variance, the impact on the surrounding community from this variance request, if granted, is really non-existent. There is, the immediate neighbor to us has no objection, as I represented to the board at the last meeting, to our request. You can't see the garage and the height of it from the road or from any other properties around it. And the scale of the property is such that it fits the style and the scope of the property, which was the rationale in the Old Town case also, that it was the scale of these buildings on these very large acreage lots, and the accessory use would have to match it. When, in response to the chairman's question about do you build the house first and then, the accessory follows afterwards, I mean, the house that's being built here is fully compliant with zoning. It is it's a very large house. It's fully 100% compliant with the height requirements and all the area setback requirements, and everything about zoning. So we could build that house as of right. And we wouldn't have to shrink it, and, so that's a justifying accessory. It's really, we have a right to build this big house, and we're asking for the accessory to match it. And that, I think, is really an ARB decision, but, certainly a factor you can consider. But in balancing the factors of the statute, in terms of the need for the variance compared to the impacts it would have on the community, there's really no factor as to impact on the immediate neighborhood of Captain's Neck from building this garage at the height we're asking. And it's actually, some of the heights that were granted in Old Town were higher than what we're asking here.
Well, I think one of the concerns that I have is that, in the taller space of the building, then we added a staircase, then there was heat, which now you've removed. So it was looking to me like it was going to be finished space.
Right.
We still have the staircase, you took away the heat, you still have dormers and windows, you put collet beams at 6'11" that 15 minutes later can be raised to 8 feet, and then you got a space again. So, why didn't you just move the ceiling of the garage up so that space wouldn't be habitable space? So you'd have taller ceilings in the garage, but, it looks like it's an apartment waiting to happen.
If you,
Further, you're talking about no effect on the community. You used the word immediate community, and I think that's valid. However, we're concerned about the effect on the village as a whole, precedent-wise. And also, I'm not so sure, your abiding reason for this was that the gentleman or the owners have a lot of precious cars. I'm not sure we're in the business, in a residential area, of worrying overly about the health and care and maintenance of cars. They can be housed, garaged at L'Aventura and other places in the village. Why should we worry about that in a residential area?
Well, let me first address your precedent concern, which I absolutely recognize as a serious concern for this board. On a 9-acre parcel, if you set a precedent for a variance for the height here under the facts that we're presenting, it would be a precedent for another very large lot that, if it were to be requested, and it may be a valid variance request. It may be that the accessory requirement for height on a 9-acre parcel or a 4-acre parcel or a 3-acre parcel in the 120 zone may not be that meaningful in terms of actual reality development. And, so you have that issue of, as I said before, a 9-acre parcel with a house that's totally compliant with zoning, and the requirement for a 16-foot garage may be something that a variance should be granted for under the circumstances here, because there's no impact on the neighborhood immediately. If it sets a precedent, it's going to set a precedent for another very, very large parcel in your village, not a half-acre, not an acre, not a 2-acre, not even a 3-acre.
Who's to say?
Can
How does
this lot-
9 shrink
this lot
down
be
to...
subdivided, Frank?
Yes, it can.
It's not necessarily a 9-acre lot.
Well,
It is now, but it could be a 4.5-acre lot or a 3-acre lot in the future.
it probably would not be able to be subdivided with the buildings that are.
I don't know where they're
Yeah,
located.
Place
but
where they are.
It
but I
might be
think-
logical that it's going to be split in two, but now it's a 4-acre lot.
But I think that's kind of part of the point too, is we could subdivide the property and put up a rather large house with garages
Yeah.
attached. The client's not looking to do that,
Well, this client, but he could sell it tomorrow and,
but then I think, and I think we discussed this at the last board meeting, in that event, we'd have a stipulation that the garages have to come down. So that, so exactly that he can't have the garages and then subdivide and build a house. So, can I have one or the other?
and you would be prepared to have that in a written covenant
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
recorded with the county.
What about the ceiling height in the garage? Rather than having a staircase, that you raise the ceiling height in the garage so that that extra height it can't be converted into living space?
Well, again, the client had asked us if we can have storage, and because he wanted storage upstairs. So the idea, because we do have a very large house with no storage, believe it or not. And so we're looking for the extra storage space. That
You
was
have
why-
2 other garages on the property now, is that correct?
We have 2 garages attached to the house.
So there's 4 garages. And no storage.
The house is, it seems crazy, but yes, unfortunately, there's very,
It
very
seems
little.
crazy, it is crazy.
But you're asking us to fix the storage problem by having a,
Well, no, I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Go ahead.
If you recall, at the work session, I believe it was, we actually didn't have a staircase up to it. And you guys had asked us to show a staircase up to it, so it was clear. Which, again, it was really, it was designed for storage. So,
You're saying that we required you to put a staircase?
yeah, you had
there?
asked us,
Please.
no, at the hearing, you had said, show the staircase.
Yeah, if there was one. We didn't say, please put a staircase so we could see it.
Okay. Isn't it- I don't
If you
fully-
think the height should be changed for these buildings in large acreage plots, then you're at the wrong board. You should be for the village board. Have them change the zoning.
well, that is one possibility, but the reason why your board exists for granting variances is to, in appropriate circumstances, grant variances and not have to go to the village for a site-specific amendment of your village zoning code. That's why, this board exists to make those determinations under the factors of the statute.
You mentioned the 5 factors. This is self-imposed, you're out there, that's one, you're not there, and effects on our community. Some of us think that it's a negative effect, that's 2 out of 5.
And it can be solved by other ways. Don't
3.
grant the variance.
Well, I think the effect on the community test is not as broad a standard as I think the chair is applying here. I think it has to be in the immediate area of the parcel. If you're concerned about a precedent being set, yes, that could be a factor you look at. But again, if you were to make a decision that this was a reasonable variance request and that it was warranted under the factors of the statute, and it was a rational thing to do, and someone else came down the road later on and asked for this relief on the similar facts, you would have to say, yes, I understand that. But if the initial request is rational and makes all the sense in the world to grant under the factors, then granting the second one makes all the sense as well. Just because it's going to be granted as a precedent doesn't mean it's bad. It may be, if it made sense in the original application that's granted, yes, it should be a precedent for the next variance that meets the exact same criteria. And so I don't think setting a precedent is a negative if there's a rational basis for granting the relief that's being sought in the initial grant.
I would venture to guess there are people in this room who will be back here in 6 months with a like application, if we grant this.
And if they have a rational application that on a 9-acre parcel with a covenant to tear down, if there's a subdivision, then you should probably grant it.
What about 6 acres, 5 acres? When does the slippery slope
That's-
from 9?
That's
Yeah,
a
kick in.
judgment call, that's a judgment call that,
Well, we're making a judgment call here, maybe. Who knows?
well,
And I also, you designed the second floor on this with dormers and windows and gable-end windows that it doesn't look like a storage area. It looks like a second floor of
and
an
that,
apartment.
that's exactly an architectural feature that the ARB would look at. The design is to match, and I know you, I don't know if we have the elevations here today, but the design of with the windows the way they are and the garage set up the way they are, is to match the house that is across from it.
Well, that's what you're saying, but.
Matching in height, too.
I mean, now, it's like, should the garage be secondary to the house, not to
No, it's not the same,
duplicate the
it's not the
house?
same height.
No, it's much smaller.
It's much
It's
smaller
still
than
much
this.
smaller.
Advance this at all for anybody's interest, the village or the applicant, to refer it to the ARB for their comment?
Well, I think we have to make the decision first.
In answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, it's a slippery slope, and I understand what you're concerned about, and I understand the reasons you're thinking about this. But again, I don't believe setting a precedent it's setting a precedent for the whole village at large. Like this particular lot is completely buffered from the roads. It's hundreds of feet back away from the road. It's not going to be seen by anybody. The next one might come in at 9 acres right on a road. And I think you might have a legitimate reason to say no. But I think I don't believe this is setting a precedent other than if somebody comes in with the identical circumstances. And I don't think that's probably that likely, but I can't say.
And what,
What's the height of this garage?
31 feet?
No,
20
20 feet? 23 feet.
The house is 35 plus the 7.
yeah.
The main dwelling is 35. And, I think Mr. Keene's comment goes to the point that if the factors of the next application match ours, and this was a rational application that should be granted, then you should grant the second one. If it's not, if it's, as you said, if the other parcel is right up on the road, it has impacts on the vistas, or whatever it is, you can distinguish that rationally and deny it, if you
Well,
will.
we've had other large houses also where they attach the garage to the house so that they could gain the height that they want because it's part of the principal structure, but I don't know if you have the setbacks or, I don't know if you considered that. You just came in for an accessory structure at a higher, did you explore that?
We did. We cannot do that because we're at our maximum square footage for the house.
Don't you think if someone comes down the road and they're right on the road and they want to bring their garages up for the sake of scale, don't you think they're going to argue that this is a gift to the community? We want it in scale for your eyes, community? Come on.
That may be an argument.
It might be an
and you
argument.
may,
Good argument, isn't it?
well, you may reject it or accept it.
Thank
That's within your discretion to do. But it's not going to have to be granted, that example that you just gave. As a matter of law, it won't have to be granted because it's this case, our case, because it isn't our case. And you would have discretion to make that judgment at that time on those facts as to whether or not that variance was warranted.
You also stated that you don't want heat right now, but you're going to come back for heat.
Yeah, that was discussed at the last hearing, and we felt that the heat was important.
So don't say that they removed the heat. They're coming right back with the heat
Right.
and air conditioning.
Yeah, but I think
It's
we
the
were,
bootstrapping process.
we were clear on that, I think, at the last meeting. That it
You
was-
did say you were going to come back.
Yeah.
Well, and it was, we removed it because if we were then to pursue it, we'd have to renotice and go for a new variance, which we recognize we'd have to do. But it has been removed from the application that's before you.
You are going to be back with it.
Yes.
I can see if the height of the garages meets the code, and you're going to put classic cars in there, I can see the need for heat and air conditioning. I don't see the need for the second story.
Again, it's more aesthetics than anything else, and so
It's an aesthetic issue, not a practical one in terms of the use of the facility.
Can I have heat and air conditioning for my Chevy? Or does
How
it have?
old's your Chevy?
I don't have a Chevy. However, but what, where are we drawing a line here between the type of car that gets heat and air conditioning?
Well, they're talking about, I assume, expensive cars that are classic cars.
Expensive cars. Mine is gonna be classic, I tell
You
you.
wait long, every car is classic. I have a classic car, I got two of them,
I
and they're
know.
not in heated garages.
Oh, okay.
But most garages
And they
that are
survive
attached
quite
to
well.
houses, they put heat in the garages now.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
attached. Mine are not attached. You helped me build it. Anything else?
Anything else from the board? Anybody from the floor? So shall we have a motion to close for decision again?
I guess so.
Is there such a motion?
You want me to move? I move we close this for decision.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Pending cases. 3032 Edwards Pine Street. Or the applicant.
Are we going to? Fine.
Evening for the applicant, Gilbert G. Flanagan, 21 South Main Street, Southampton. As you know, this application started back in February, and a question was raised as to the validity of the use of the building for non-conforming retail use. And since then, I've been in touch with the attorney representing the owner, and while we've gotten some information, it's inconclusive. So what I propose to do would be to proceed under an alternate approach to the application. Now, to make things simpler, because you have a fairly long agenda, I did prepare yesterday and submit a letter with some attachments which outlines what I was going to say tonight. So rather than my going through all of it, I think you can read it. It includes a number of attachments. I'll just summarize what they were, and if you have any particular questions. As I say, we have decided to proceed on an alternate approach, as opposed to the substituting one non-conforming use for another or getting rid of a non-conforming use. As I indicated in what I submitted, you'll see in the letter that I first gave a little bit of the history of the property and pointed out what I think are some relevant facts concerning the property, including that it's not in the historic district, that the building itself, with the exception of a few very minor modifications to the southerly elevation of the building, will remain essentially unchanged, will not be enlarged. I understand there was a question at one of your work sessions, perhaps, that with respect to the proposed second access, we were suggesting at the south end of the property there were some projections from the building that could make that even though it conformed to the code, possibly not usable or not as safe as it could be, so we've submitted an amended survey showing that those projections have been removed, or in the case of the gas meter, relocated, so that there would be at least 12 to 15 feet of free width between the building and the edge of the property. It's important to note that in the village code, the minimum width requirement for a driveway in a residential zone is 10 feet. As I also indicated in an earlier submission, when you have a property that has more than 100 feet of frontage on a street, you're entitled to 2 curb cuts, and this property does in fact have more than 100 feet of frontage on Pine Street. So I think it's important that you know that those changes were made to the survey and the site plan, which is reflected in what I submitted. It's also important to note that the off-street parking we have shown meets the code. There are 4 off-street parking spaces shown in a conforming location. There are 3 bedrooms in the northerly house, which would require 2 spaces. And in the southerly house, if you were to grant the request, that would be a 1-bedroom, which would require 2 spaces, so we comply with the number of spaces the code stipulates. We also think that this is a good design for safety and practical reasons. The safety reason being that it would obviate the need for piggyback parking, even though the building department tells me that they would allow one car to be parked behind another. They accept that as a matter of the code, which would mean that if you had the car parked in front of another car, the car in the back would have to back out. This design would make that unnecessary. It also would provide a separate access for each of the residences on the site. One of the other things which I mentioned at the outset is that part of this process would involve the installation of the up-to-date low-nitrogen sanitary system. It did take us some time to find out and make sure that the soil conditions and the depth of groundwater were sufficient, but during the last month or so, we've had tests done, and that, in fact, would work. That system would be able to be installed in
Is
accordance
there going to
with
be one system serving both buildings?
whatever works, whatever the health department requires, we would install. But there's enough room for one system. I suspect that given the fact that the second dwelling would be a 1-bedroom dwelling, that would be possible. The good news is that there's enough depth to groundwater and the soil conditions are such that it would work, and we could meet the various setbacks from buildings and so forth that the health department requires.
And they're not going to take down the shop, they're just going to
No,
renovate the
they're just
inside.
the outside. The only change we're going to make of a structural nature, there's a bay window on the south side which projects southerly. We're going to remove that, and there are 2 window wells which we would fill in. The building is basically going to remain the same. It's not going to be enlarged.
And then the only curb cut is between the 2 buildings?
I'm sorry?
The only curb cut is between the 2 buildings?
No, there'll be a second curb cut to the south of the southerly building.
And that's where there's 12.4 feet.
Right.
And then there's area wells there is.
Yeah, we're going to be eliminating those.
The window wells?
Yeah, we're going to be eliminating them.
And the meter, you said.
And the meter is going to, if you look at the most recent survey, the gas meter is being located to the east side of the building.
So that'll give you the 12 feet.
If you look at the survey, and I scaled it out, the further back you go, it widens out to about
Widens up,
15
yeah,
feet.
okay.
So, yeah, we would be eliminating all of those. So we would have more than enough that the code requires. And we would be able, on top of that, to get back through there to access the sanitary system to service it if it's necessary.
This is the old survey.
Yeah, you
So
should-
with a 1-story building that, I guess, garage, that's going to be eliminated and that's just going to become yard?
Yes, it's going to become, we are proposing in some of that area a swimming pool which requires no variances. What you should be looking at is the survey last revised April.
This is the one I just got in this April 24th package, but it
Right.
doesn't show that.
If you look at the submission I made on April 15th, there is a map which was dated April 11th, and it shows that those projections I mentioned are to be removed. Yeah, actually, where the garage and shop is, the Sure. See that, but
There's the pool over here.
actually, the proposed pool does not even go really where the garage and shop are being removed. Now, what I did give you in my most recent submission is a map which shows what of the existing northerly building we're removing.
You got rid of all the areaways.
This is this is not a new
And
map.
take a look at, make sure you're looking at
April
revised
15?
April 14th, April 11th. That's the survey that
April
shows
11th,
those removals.
okay.
I don't have
The
that.
gas meter's there and everything.
April 11th.
Everything's there. You have that from, not new.
No, that
it's
was
from
a-
the old folder.
That was submitted on April 15th.
Yeah, mine
May-
is
meters
dated
is still
November
there.
something.
We have a new survey, but it's really the old survey, with no pool in there.
Yeah, no, what that shows is what's being removed. You should look, I
Right.
made a submission on April 15th.
Yeah, this is April 15th, yeah.
Oh,
I have it, but the
okay.
survey is dated November 19th.
Yeah, that's an older survey, and I submitted that to show what we're taking off.
Okay,
The old, did you see the cross hatching? That's what shows being removed from
right. You're taking off that
On this one,
Yes,
garage and driveway.
Yeah,
Yes.
it says it on that.
yeah, yeah, and he took them out on the new one.
yeah, there are notes, you see where the gas meter's been relocated to the east side of the building.
Okay. Bring home the milk.
But, I mean, you don't know that
Yeah,
for the septic system,
good. What is it?
you have a swimming
This-
pool, but you might have to use some of that space for septic
House you wanna
system.
get in?
Well, we took a look at that, I had the surveyors look at that, that the pool will not interfere. In fact, we have enough, the required setback between the pool and the septic system.
But I mean,
According to
that's a
Squire's
septic
folder.
system for cottage, for the one-story cottage building, or for both?
I'll find out about that.
Because I see the septic system for the one-story cottage, but I don't see any septic system for the two-story
My understanding
house.
is it would cover both, but I'll verify that.
Well, I mean, on your earlier survey, it shows covers, but it's
Right.
where the pool is.
I'll get back to you on that. I believe it's to service them both, but
It is.
I'll clarify that with you.
Yeah, the cover's over there.
Yeah, I think we would want to see a complete design of an approved septic system.
Okay,
Where it's all going to be located
Right.
and how it fits on the property.
okay.
Because sometimes health department has trouble with parking on top of septic system. I want to make sure that's not an issue
Generally, they allow it as long as you have traffic-bearing covers on them, if you file a covenant.
sometimes,
Yeah,
but
most of the time, but I'll find out about that, and I'll show you a design.
Did you include in the package we have the number of guest houses in the neighborhood?
This is the one you have.
No, what I submitted there was,
okay.
as you know, on the opposite side of Pine
Yeah.
Street, that's a multifamily
I'd say
zone.
removing-
Also, in the Meeting House Lane, there were a number of
Show the-
multifamily houses, and I submitted a table, which is part of what I submitted yesterday, that shows the street addresses of all those houses. In fact, the property immediately to the east of this property has multiple dwellings on it. In fact, you granted relief to that property, I think, last year. So, yeah, I submitted a tax map that shows where the MF zone is, the MF20 zone is, and then I submitted a table which shows the various buildings, which I got from village building records, which have multiple families in them. So they predominate in this area. So doing this would not be out of character with the,
Well, multiple family dwellings, but one structure. Is
some of
that-
them are separate structures. In fact, I believe that the property immediately to the east of this has several structures on it.
yeah, I know in Meeting House Lane is a number with
And
separate
I know that
structures, a
a
lot.
friend of mine had a property, I think it was on the south side of Meeting House Lane, that had two separate buildings with apartments in them, so I can represent to you that that's fairly common. And by the way, that neighbor to the east submitted a letter of support, which I included in my package. He was delighted that the extremely non-conforming shop and garage building were being removed. They're within about 2 feet of his property line, and apparently there are pests and infestation, all of which my client would rectify. The record should also show that the people immediately to the north of this property submitted a letter in favor of the application. I think it's important that you do take a look at the tax map, the MF20 zoning district, and the table that I submitted. This is not only multifamily dwellings, but multiple families, multiple buildings on a lot are common to this particular area.
It seems like the footprint that you're removing seems just about the same size as the shop that you're renovating. So one of the options might have been just to keep what you're removing and remove the shop, and you'd have the same additional square footage. But it seems like, just correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the owner's trying to create a guest house.
Actually, he's trying to create a separate single-family dwelling. That's what we asked for. There's no question about it. So to do what you suggested, to take away the building and put that unit in the northerly building, I'd still have two families.
Right,
It's
but
still
one
has-
structure.
Yeah, two families, one structure, but what's the difference? Density-wise, there's no difference, density-wise. And we're not constructing, if anything, there's going to be less on this property than there is now.
You're reducing lot coverage.
We're reducing, even with the pool, we're reducing lot coverage by over 400 square feet.
And that building's been there, what, 50,
The
180
building's been there,
years?
the building's been there for a long time. The northerly extension of the northerly building, as I say, is virtually on the property line, and we'd be eliminating all of that, and the fellow next door is delighted to know that we'd be doing that, cleaning up that situation.
Now, you're calling out 3 bedrooms in the first, one house, and 1 bedroom in the second.
One bedroom.
But we don't, do we have a floor, just a floor plan
I
showing?
think you
how-
did earlier, I don't know that you have a floor plan of the northerly building, but we did give you floor plans for the building we're proposing to
Okay.
Bert. That was submitted early on, so you do have that.
So after you're done, you're gonna have 2 residences, right?
Correct.
One is a 3-bedroom residence, one is a one-bedroom residence, and you're gonna have a pool.
Pool and no shop and garage.
No shop and no garage. Giving up the retail use.
Right, to the extent that there's a retail use to give up, we're giving it up. I say, unfortunately, we
Which
weren't
may
able.
have expired anyway, so.
I mean,
We
you're
don't
going to have
know.
a pool if the septic works out.
I'm sorry, right, depends on that, and we'll have that designed. Now, just for the record, as I mentioned earlier on, my client is a contract vendee, and he has a contract that's conditional on this. And one of the things that he relied on was that there is a CO, and that when you drive by the building, it certainly looks like a retail shop. It's got a name on it, it's got awnings and so forth. So there's been no intent, certainly on my part, to mislead you or misrepresent anything to you. One of the things that I think is important to note is that if this application is something like it is not granted, what happens to that building? It'd be a white elephant. You'd have, if the only thing it could possibly be is an accessory building, which is nearly double the size that the code allows. So by,
Or it could be a rented shop again, because it's, yeah.
well, if we,
But then it's parking in the street and,
correct, it'd be parking. This way, the parking is off the street, which I know has been a big thing. It's all off the street, it's all in a conforming location. Your questions about the sanitary system are good, and I'll certainly get back to you on those. Just about everything I've said is in what I submitted yesterday, so I don't want to take too much time.
are these both natural gas?
I
Yeah, gas meter, I
believe
guess,
so.
yeah. So there's no buried tanks or anything?
No, no. In fact, I think I had,
I see the meter on the front house.
actually, if you hold on, I think we had somebody, I think we had Eastern Environmental go out and make a study of that. Bear with me for a minute, I'm pretty sure that they came up with, there were no tanks, I'm pretty sure, but let's see if here we go, right? I don't want to take it, I can get back to you on that, but I believe they're both natural gas. And if there was a tank, I'm sure if that had to be removed, we'd remove it. I think this really is a relatively unique piece of property. You have something that directly abuts a multifamily zone. You have a number of multifamily properties and properties with multiple buildings on them in the neighborhood. This is also, as you know, within the last few years, they changed this to a one-way street in front of this property, so that the amount of traffic has been lessened as a result of it. So that I think that you could take that into account. There are not that many one-way streets in the village. I think there's,
Because of the school.
right, it's because of the school. I think Burnett Street, or one of those streets, is one way, but that's near the school, too. So I think in terms of traffic, there certainly won't be an increase in traffic, and getting the parking, all the parking off the street, I think is a plus. And the thing that I'm worried about, and it's been voiced to me, is that if some use of this property, meaningful use, isn't come up with, this could become an eyesore, because nobody would buy it, nobody would use it.
Wouldn't it just revert to a single-family residence?
But then what would happen to that building, that 800
It would
square?
have to be given up.
It would just sit there.
Well, we're giving up
knocked
storage.
down. Why would somebody, but who would buy it in that
Well,
situation?
somebody else, the purchase price would have to be adjusted.
Well, as I say, I think it makes sense. The building's part of the neighborhood. It's been there for probably 50 years, 60 years. Certainly no change in the character. Actually, to take it down would result in a change in the neighborhood. Whereas right here, we're trying to keep it, it's going to keep the same look. There just won't be much activity in it. So I don't think I need to say any more unless you have any questions. I'll certainly get back to you on the sanitary system matter.
Any other questions from the board? From the floor? Ms. McFarland, please introduce yourself to the crowd.
Board, Bob. Property owner, voter, Jim McFarland's the name. Couple of the things I'd like to touch on, one is traffic. You mentioned the one-way street. I don't know if you've been at the parking lot in back of the Hampton Bay shops in the summer at all, but as a result of the one-way street, we have traffic chaos there in the summer. You can't get there anymore. But that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is whether you should issue this permit for a non-conforming use in a single-family district. And I could see doing this on a moral basis. If an old-timey Southampton family owned this property and they'd fallen on hard times, unexpected illness, the main wage earner, and they needed another little unit on their property to get enough money to eke by. You can easily approve this contingent on when it's sold, this right goes away. However, the issue really boils down to whether any old building on any old lot in any old zone can be turned into a residence. That's really the issue. So what if somebody has a non-conforming garage that's 6 inches too close to the lot line, that has a little bit more space upstairs in it, and he decides, well, instead of having this horrible non-conforming garage, I would like to have a horrible non-conforming accessory apartment in my backyard. That's the issue. I don't see how you can easily decide this. But it sort of sounds like spot zoning, which we went through here like 20 years ago with George Submergent, and some of the things he wanted to pull off. And God heaven selig, as they say in German. But the village board really should be the one who makes the type of legislative decision whether or not isolated lots can be turned into a totally different zone or not. That's my viewpoint, and thank you very much.
Anybody else from the floor like to speak on this issue?
I just would like to remind the board that a single-family dwelling in its zone is a conforming use. It's not, this is not an expansion of a non-conforming use. In fact, in a couple of cases, one of which I gave you a copy of in my package, stands for that proposition. This is really area-type relief. I refer you to the decision that I gave in the package yesterday.
What was it before it was retail, I wonder?
I don't know, as far as I can remember, even when I was young, it was a retail shop.
That's how I always remember that, as always as a retail.
I think it was Mitzi's Beauty Salon at one point, too. This goes way back, but it's been that. I think it was built for that purpose. And that's another reason. Another possibility is that somebody could come back and try to reactivate a retail use there. Do you really want a retail use in a residential zone? So that's another question.
Any further comments from any quarter? Would you like to close this for decision?
Well, we gotta get the septic information.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If it's subject, maybe
Sorry.
subject to our submitting that information on the septic system, that would be desirable. Subject to the septic
Close
information.
it subject to that.
Do that, close the decision subject to health department, is it?
Well, it's the septic system design issue. Show we can fit it.
I so moved, that was it.
I'll
There's
second.
a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Decision suspect for not. The next pending case is 3031 405 Captain's Neck Lane. here. Last call. Number 3033, Mercedes Cunahan, 21 Hillcrest.
Hi, how are you?
All right. Now, you had some work to do, yes?
Yes, I have a homework.
Okay, first of which was, or which would you like to present first?
Well, I went back to get the original survey for the house. It's for 17 Hillcrest, which is now 21. And the original setbacks are 13.4. I included that in the packet. And then the board requested that I pull up the surveys of the houses next to mine. And the number 33, the setbacks are 19.9, the next house to me. And then house number 37, the newest house up there that just got redone and purchased in 2017 is 14.2. Yeah, I know. And the house across from me is, number 24 is 14.3. So the surveys are all in there.
That seems to work in your favor.
I think so. And then you guys requested the original deed, so I was able to go get the original deed for 17 and the original deed for 21. There was no survey for 21 because it was a non-buildable lot. It was just nothing. And you also wanted the picture of the variance sign. That's in there.
Let's work through that. Here it is. Got the picture.
So you have like, what, 4 or 5 different houses on the street that are less than 20 feet?
Less than 20 feet. I just went up to the church, but the church is business. I didn't go past the church. There was one more house, I think it's 48, and I think they were 23.2. That was the biggest one.
All the other things Wayne wanted.
The photographs of the original cottage?
That was the original house, yeah. And the updated prints show that the pool setbacks that were 6 feet from the door are now 9 feet, so we did a 14 by 29.
Yes, 14 by 29, and there's also a railing.
Railing there too?
3-foot railing.
Okay, I think smaller pool is in order.
The addition is still 25 feet back.
I'm sorry.
The addition is still 25 feet back?
The principal building, yes, not the deck.
Skyline's all right. Any questions from the board?
No.
Any questions from the floor? No
I
questions.
think she's answered what we asked her for at the one second.
I think she does. If I could only remember. Well, Wayne had a lot of questions. What are we leaving out?
Nothing. Miss Diane loves me. I was in the low enough.
Okay.
I have to return the paper clip. There's a whole thing.
Those parking issues, did we get the,
Yeah, we had it.
because you were supposed to be 10 feet from the road in the front, and you didn't have the space, did we address that?
There's no space, there's no room to have that 10-foot setback.
The only
Did you
suggestion
make the
was to
driveway
bring.
deeper into the property?
I will
Yes.
if I'm allowed. That's what you guys asked me to do. I can do that. Doesn't interfere with those steps.
I think
also
you have to
think that's
show
what
us
we
that, like on a survey, that how you can get make it deeper and comply with the number of spaces, and then show the parking space in the front as a 1 space with it 10 feet from the road. So it'd be good to see that.
And would that be all we need, do we think?
Yeah, I think that-
So do we want to,
and you have septic, you got your septic approval for this
Yeah.
already?
Yeah, that was Borowski, yeah, that came in.
Right, and then the building permit is applied for?
Building permit's in, the HERS rating is in, everything is done. The material list is ready.
So they're just waiting for us to approve your permit, is that what it is?
Yeah, basically.
so the work session is May 14th. Do you think you could get a revised survey or whatever showing the parking by then?
We'll be able to do it, we'll be able to, yeah.
Are you willing to close the decision pending that submission? Gentlemen?
You want to close it pending the submission showing the parking?
Parking.
Also move that, yeah.
He'll move that. Is there a second here for that?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we're closed, subject to showing parking.
So if you could bring that work session would be good.
Let's bring it to work session.
Okay.
And then after that, I have to come back again.
You don't have to come back. We can just
I
vote,
like coming
vote on. Well, fine, come on back.
Make sure to bring the paperclip.
I'll bring it all back. Okay,
Okay?
so bring it, yes,
Okay.
thanks. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rob, could I just make a comment on the case before this? You went over that pretty quickly. That was 3031,
Yeah,
5 Captain's Neck.
yeah.
There was no representative here, but we did receive updated plans, and we called, we spoke about it at work session, and there were no outstanding questions.
Okay.
So you may recall that I was asked at the work session to draft a
To
permit.
draft it, and you did,
And you
right?
do have that.
Okay.
I could just comment that there was a boat sling that was removed from over the wetlands area. It's beyond the wetlands now.
Okay.
The pier was reconfigured. It's now 15 feet from the property line. They're removing an existing pier that's closer to the property line and goes through the wetlands, and they reduced the length of it. So to my knowledge, there were no outstanding questions.
Okay. And you submitted that permit, yeah?
And there was a draft permit. So I know you didn't call the public and it's still open, but the applicant did submit the information that we had requested.
Okay, so what is your recommendation? Voting on it or closing it? Closing it?
You have a draft permit. We can certainly clean up the calendar if you wanted to move it
Okay.
tonight. And I guess because it's open, all can comment, but you may need to just call to the public.
Any, okay. So reopening for now, 3031, 405 Captain's Neck Lane. We are now.
Well, you never closed it, you just passed over it.
Right.
We just
Correct.
passed over, didn't we?
Rediscussing it, I should say. So, is there a motion to close this for decision?
Close it for decision, or you want to accept?
Approve it.
Do we have to close it before we approve it?
No.
No, you can approve it.
Oh, okay. Is there a motion then
Yeah,
to
I
do so?
move we approve it as recommended by our environmental consultant.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye, and aye. If I could get that file at some point, please. That,
What's the number?
Before you go to
3031.
new cases, if it's at all possible to
Right.
look at that modification.
I do want to look at that. I'd like to go to the bottom of the sheet for modifications of previously issued permit. The modifications have been discussed, the work session, and,
There is a representative here that would like to address the board.
okay. Oh, there you are.
Good evening, board members. Grant Wellman of Eris Design for the applicant, Fred Wyman. As you are aware, this is a modification to a previous approval of plans we prepared for the board dated May 21st of 2018. Since that time, there was some disturbance to the property beyond the approved limits of clearing. And although we weren't involved in the construction oversight, the owner reached out to us immediately. We met with him on site to review, and we subsequently met with Mr. Voorhees to review. As requested by Mr. Voorhees, we mapped out all of the disturbance beyond the approved clearing line. And we developed some mitigation plans. I have those here. This is the plan that we prepared. This is a current aerial, which shows the disturbance. The area hatched in blue here is what was approved. And the area that was disturbed beyond that is in between in green here and here.
How did that happen?
Well, again, we weren't involved in the oversight of the construction activity, but
This was directly between the owner and the contractor?
yes, sir. Apparently, there was some confusion between what was said. The owner has prepared a letter detailing his explanation of what happened.
Was the area demarked that was the limitation of the original clearing? Had that been
I
marked?
don't believe it was. There was a silt fence installed on the easterly edge of the construction activity,
I saw that.
but the limit of work was never delineated, and I think the client's letter goes into this in some detail, but I believe what happened was the contractor decided to work from inside the property as requested by the board. And instead of just using the disturbance as the access points, they mistakenly traveled in between to access the areas that they were going to be revegetating.
Should that have been marked off?
Yes, I mean, this, we did meet in the field, and this is clearly what I would consider to be a violation because it didn't conform to a previously issued permit. A couple of the things that are notable are that there were a number of trees that were in an area for a proposed rain garden that were actually left. And probably the biomass of those trees is greater than what was removed. But there were some trees that were removed that weren't supposed to be. So it's a trade-off. When we met in the field, we felt that we were able to design a rain garden that would accommodate drainage that we wanted to ensure was retained on the site in a biofiltration area. Those trees, we are intending to remain, the ones that stand now, and additional landscaping will be placed to make up for the trees that were removed. So not a great situation. We're not happy about it at all. We were contacted to come up with some solutions, and this is a effort by the applicant to bring the ZBA up to speed on what happened, the reasons, come up with a mitigation plan, and ameliorate and address the situation as best as we can.
Did you happen to look at it after the rain? You know,
I did, I
any
went by today.
runoff
I
problem?
didn't see any runoff, gully erosion, sheet runoff, certainly nothing in Pond Lane, no issues that I saw.
As part of the original plans, we performed a test hole in the area, and the soil there is extremely sandy, so despite all the rains, it seems like everything's just perking down right away, which is helpful for a rain garden design, but also because of that, there's no sedimentation at all on the silt fence.
I'd like to note in the letter that the owner's explanation of what happened is, quote, "I am at a loss to explain what actually occurred."
Okay.
I do think there was some disagreement between the contractor and the owner. And again, you know, we weren't involved in that, but we're just trying to look forward and revegetate the area as quickly as
Well,
possible.
all the boards have a problem with people engaging in activities that are not authorized by the boards, and then when it's done, and it's the theory of easier to ask for forgiveness and permission, but there doesn't seem to be any downside to disregarding a lot of these permits.
I can tell you, Bo, that the owner was on the site when we met him.
Yeah, I know,
and
he's
I
dedicated.
expressed the exact same thing,
Yeah.
so he is aware. Again, we're dealing with a situation, and
His Mayor Cooper
these things don't
repairs,
happen.
you know, the Mayor Cooper repairs that to make up for the infraction, you feel more than cover the misdeed, per se? In other words, is the net result going to be a better, or at least equal or better than what we approved?
It is a balance, Dan, and I would say that leaving the trees that, the trees that are remaining that were supposed to be removed are actually pretty significant, and they're good native species. So on balance, I think it is the best solution. I also think that the rain garden location is improved over what was previously proposed. It's a little farther from the road right-of-way. There's a little less grading required. Again, I don't want to make excuses for what happened, but the outcome, in my opinion, will be an improvement.
I'd also just like to point out that, in our original application, we showed some historical areas of the site, and it was all farmland, since the 30s. And a lot of what's happened there is just, it's been a hotbed for invasive material to come in, and, most of what was in there was of little value at all. So everything that we're replacing it with is going to be healthy natives that will stand up to all the pressures of the area. And if you remember driving down Pond Lane on that north section there, I mean, you'll remember it was just a mess. It looked like a jungle along there. So, again, I can't speak directly for why it happened or, make any excuses, but we just want to look forward and do the right thing and get it planted as soon as possible.
Right, and timing is becoming important, I guess.
What's needed from us, a new approval?
I don't know if there's any other comments, but I did prepare, and again, this is based on work session when we did talk about this as well. I did prepare a draft permit for your consideration. It does recognize the revised plan, and your observation is correct. You're under construction, you're in the planting season, and I think, that's one of the more important factors is to make sure that the sites get stabilized and planted as soon as possible. So you have that for your consideration.
We can grant absolution.
What's the recommendation? You always open or?
I don't see why. I think we
I
should,
thought that's what.
You have a draft permit. If you care to act on it tonight.
Or you want us to close this?
let's close it.
I think, quite honestly, unless there's other input or comments, I'm not asking for any changes to the plan. If you're comfortable with it, you could act on it tonight, if that's what the board wishes to do.
That's what I'd like to do. Anybody else from the floor want to comment? Okay, is there a motion to accept the modifications, basically?
I so move.
No, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Okay, next case, new cases, in fact. 3035 Simotas, 1485 Meadow Lane.
I don't think we did that.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Kim Stevens from N Consultants, 1319 North Sea Road. Turning in the affidavits of mailing, affidavits of posting, and the green card receipts, and also requesting an adjournment until next month.
You're requesting an adjournment.
Yes.
Yes, we'll grant that. Can we have a motion to adjourn this hearing?
That was quick.
Is there a second, possibly?
I second.
All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Aye. So we're here for that. All right. Next case is 3036 The Stones, 527 Meadow Lane.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Billy Mack, First Coastal, Arthur Street, West Hampton Beach.
That's the wall.
Yeah.
This is the wall.
I visited it, the wall's
Build a
down.
beautiful wall.
The wall.
No longer a wall.
Sure. Does that work?
No, one more.
Oh, facing the board. Thank you.
You saw the wall, yes.
Sure.
That's one quite ugly wall.
So there was an existing wall on this property that's probably predates me, and it's 187 feet. It was originally built of concrete and terracotta, and it is, as you can see from the photos, looks like it had some retention on it, and it couldn't stand that from the age, and subsequently has failed. Collapsed.
Yeah, it only predates you, it's a lot uglier than you. I'll tell you, what's the
I'll take that as
purpose,
a compliment, thank you.
what's the purpose of this wall?
So this wall is, it's been on this property, it actually extends all the way through the property to the seaward property. So, and there's a similar feature on the eastern side of the property. Right now, it's a boundary line wall, and it does act more like a retention wall now.
Retaining what?
There was some development done on the adjacent property, so I guess during heavy storms, there seems to be some potential hydraulic pressure. And I think that's what led to its failure. So ideally, what we'd like to do is replace it with a wall that could withstand that, and in the exact same location, same height.
You know, I'm having thoughts about any need for a wall at all. And if there's a condition, like flooding or hydraulic pressure or whatever, I'd like a lot of data on that, or maybe the wall should just go away.
I know that the applicant would prefer to reinstall it. It's part of their property that's been there for quite some time, and I think it also provides a privacy barrier between them.
Build a fence.
It's a glorified fence, yeah. Right, it was built out of concrete and terracotta, so I guess it was meant to last for quite some time.
How high?
It varies from 4 to 6 feet.
New one would be what?
We would keep the same height, yeah.
Would you weigh on, what do you think the environmental effect is of rebuilding the wall as you're proposing?
Well, you could either try to rebuild it with a concrete structure similar to the way it was built. From my point of view, I think that it's a more sensitive way to build it would be to build it as like a bulkhead, essentially. A concrete wall would need footings, and part of this wall is in the buffer area, and part of it extends into the wetlands. So to build those footings, you'd have to excavate down into the wetlands, which I would prefer not to do.
And I guess my question is, are we better off environmentally without the wall, or for some reason are we better off environmentally rebuilding the wall?
I cannot think of a good reason to rebuild the wall.
Could they accomplish what they
we don't
want to
have
do
any
with just a fence
information.
on the property line?
Yeah, I mean, that may achieve some of what they're looking to do, but we really don't have any information on the property to the west. You can see the wetlands are, well into the property on the west side of the property, and I would prefer to see flow between those areas in terms of, tidal activity. So it just seems as though rebuilding the wall, it probably wasn't a great idea at the time, but, we're in the year 2019, and rebuilding a 6-foot bulkhead that extends perpendicular into the waterway through the wetlands just does not seem like a good idea to me environmentally.
And leaving it 6 feet out of the ground so he gets the benefit of a fence from a wall.
Right, and it impedes wildlife, it impedes water flow, it traps material, it causes scouring, just the disturbance of the wall itself. Certainly the existing condition isn't great, and, my preference would be to have the rubble removed, but I just don't see a good justification for rebuilding a 6-foot bulkhead. I mean, it's really, it's kind of a return, but there's no bulkhead going the other way, and there's really no purpose to this
Fiberglass
bulkhead.
sheeting they were gonna drive into the ground, correct?
Right, right. Yeah, so I don't have any environmental justification for it.
Our plan was to come up with something that would be the least invasive to accomplish replacing it almost identically as it stood in the past. So,
Well,
as
the bulkhead
opposed-
seems pretty invasive to me.
well, it's less invasive than rebuilding a concrete wall.
But
So
a fence would be less invasive than all of that.
a fence would be less invasive, and that may be the best option at this point. But I think the goal of the retention is not accomplished with a fence, and there seems to be an issue with retention and hydraulic pressure from runoff from the adjacent
But you haven't
property.
given us any data or proof on, and
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy
environmental
to-
said
Yeah,
the
we
water
need to
flow
look
would be
at
better.
a lot more information.
Yeah.
But in any case, you're using the word invasive in any situation. Why do we need invasions into the wetland for this purpose?
Well, there is some runoff from the adjacent property that has to be addressed.
Maybe
Is that landward of the wetlands or seaward of the
It
wetlands?
extends, the Stones buffer area extends farther north than the buffer area of the adjacent property. So the retention would be to protect that buffer area as well.
What a rainforest.
Doesn't the neighbor have to manage water on his own property?
An existing condition.
But you're saying that's runoff, you mean it's like roof runoff? Or are you talking about just
Undetermined.
tidal runoff? Because I think what our environmentalists will say that the ebb and flow from tidal runoff should be natural.
That's
It
gonna
would work
happen no
better
matter
Without it.
Right.
If
With
you're
respect
saying
to
that
that-
his house is causing rainwater erosion, show it to me. you know?
It's a new development of a house. That house was lifted and backfilled substantially. So now the water that used to be, spread throughout the property now is directed directly onto that wall.
Yeah, but I haven't seen the data from the new house. Usually that rainwater is.
That has to be addressed when you're into construction.
Yeah, there should be dry wells and stuff for that property. I don't know if that's a fact.
Yeah, we're not in control of the other property, so.
Yes. So, but you're saying it, but
Right, I mean, I'd be happy to review that on
You could
site.
check building plans, you could look at topography, you could look at runoff potential. There's a lot of things that we would need to see.
Yeah, and I'm happy to review that.
Yeah.
Sure.
From the look of this debris, I don't think this just happened in the last week or two. This looks like it's been going on for years and years.
No, it did happen all of a sudden. It did, it was after a rainstorm.
This debris happened all of a sudden?
The wall, yes, it did.
Straw that did it.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of pressure on it. I mean,
Well, if you
it stood
found-
there for many years.
If found the neighbor was somehow impacting this property negatively, perhaps you could negotiate with that neighbor.
And I think that they needed variances next door, didn't they? It's not that long ago that the construction was done.
Yeah, it isn't that long ago. I think it's about two years ago.
Yeah.
It was fine.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you think that they wouldn't have to manage water on their own property? I don't get it.
Well, they probably do,
Yeah.
but it's not in the control of the Stones.
Didn't we give some relief to this property some years ago? The Stone property, I remember
Yeah.
we had the Stones before us at one time.
I think
There was a permit issued. I remember this one as well, probably over 10 years ago.
they own both sides of the road, and I
Yeah,
think
they
they
own the
wanted to
ocean side
update
and they own this
the
property
bay
on the
side.
bay side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the old
What was that
warehouse.
relief for, do you remember, Chick?
I don't. I'd have to.
I thought it was an addition to that.
It was an addition, or it was something, it's so close to the road, but it was...
In addition
They had a
to this
garage,
property, or-
they
No,
were
I
doing
think it
something
was-
to a
it was like
garage.
a derelict barn, and I think they wanted to
Yeah.
bring it up.
It's not the stucco one.
Yes.
It
is
is
the
the
stucco
stucco
one.
one.
Yeah.
Well, they rose that.
Well, they rose it, they also had some berms in front of it that they wanted to do.
I thought that was on the other side, yeah.
No, that's on the bay
I
side.
don't think the variance was to the ocean side,
No, it wasn't.
it was to the bay side.
Yeah, they wanted to redo a barn or facility.
Yeah.
They needed A or B approval.
So that's been done?
What, 3, 4, 5 years?
As far as I know, yeah.
Right, and there were some buffer areas that were imposed then that are.
Yeah, and they show on the
Satisfactory.
aerial as well.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you'd have to come back and prove to us some extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, I'd like the opportunity to meet together, go on site.
Absolutely, happy
See if we can come
to
up
speak
with
more
a
about it.
nice solution.
Yep, but I think you have a sense of the comments and the concerns.
Sure. Yeah, and I do, yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Even?
Is there anyone here?
So you're requesting the board,
Oh, anybody from the public? I'm sorry.
requesting an adjournment of the application?
Is
Yeah.
there such a motion?
I'll move we adjourn this
No,
application.
no, you move that accept the applicant's request to adjourn.
The applicant's request to adjourn for all purposes.
Thank you.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, yeah.
See you, Bill.
Slap by, I'm recused from this.
Did you fill out the documents?
Yes, I did. Good to see you.
All right.
I have an appointment to get to.
Bye-bye.
Draw your king.
Thank you.
You okay?
We're moving a big house over there and calling it a small house.
It's like more than 37 square feet. Isn't it?
Very nice. Very
Thanks, Dan.
Yours? Yours?
Okay.
Mine? The others?
The others, there's no. Sample garbage.
Another one, Bo?
For the applicant.
The applicant, John Bennett, Bennett and Reed, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York, and Bruce Lifton is with me this evening, who's the contract, Lifton Green is the contract vendee. So what do we have here? We have a house at the property, south side of Ox Pasture, east of Halsey Neck Lane, and there's an existing single-family residence and detached garage on the property. And we've submitted the current survey as well as the CO, the application. This house is a contributing structure within the Village Historic District. And it's the Pico House, and we submitted also with the application what's generally referred to as the blue sheet, which is the Historic Preservation Parks and Recreation sheet, which was, you've seen these before, more commonly seen before the ARB, which, by the way, we're before the ARB on the 13th of May on this application, because there's a referral required under the section of the code that we are before you on, at least one of the sections. So this is a contributing structure in the village of Southampton, which, from a point of view of redevelopment of the property, creates some issues. So when I was first presented with this issue, I said, well, there's a couple of ways to go about this. And I think by far what we presented here is the preferred manner, which is to take this approximately 3,900 square foot house, which is a contributing structure currently in the rear of the property.
Take the map, sir, please, for the director.
Charlie? Where are we going?
Put it on top of the house, John. The house is...
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks, Bruce. So the house is currently in the back, it's about 3,900 square feet in total, 3 stories. And to move it, this contributing structure, 90 feet from Ox Pasture Road, make it more visible to the public, this contributing structure, and ask under the relevant code section, which is 11628K, to permit the conversion of this current single-family residence to a guest house for a new single-family residence, which is more consistent and commensurate with the houses in the area in terms of size. This is I don't have to tell anyone that Ox Pasture Road is a neighborhood that has significant old, large homes on it. So there are 2 ways to do this. One is the way we've proposed, and the other is to do something which I think, based upon my experience for some time in appearing before the Architectural Review Board, is something that the Architectural Review Board would not favor, which is to try to put an addition onto this house. It creates significant issues in terms with their standards and policies, not only the standards and policies as is written in the code, but the standards and policies that they have adopted in their own body of decisions, which is keeping additions subservient to the existing house and issues of height, scale, size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This was done, what we're attempting to do here in terms of redevelopment of the property. The other way to skin the cat, so to speak, was actually approved some years ago. I think 2 lots down. 2 lots down? 2 lots down. 2 lots down.
2 lots to the east.
2 lots to the east, yeah. It was the old, it was the gardener's house for the old Lloyd Smith estate. You know, you've got the big Lloyd Smith estate now, which is owned by Jürgen Friedrich. That's that big, stucco, very substantial house. And to the east of that house was this very charming gardener's house that had an attached greenhouse, if you'll remember it. I just remember it because having been... It was to the west of it.
To the west of it, yes.
So what I think Michael Miller was the developer, what he did was they took that house, that gardener's house, which was probably about the same size as this house, and they made it a wing of a much larger house. I think you'll remember that, Bo. So really, the Lloyd Smith...
They divided the property first.
They divided the property first, yes, because...
You're not dividing the property here.
No, I'm not dividing the property here, but the treatment of the house is what I'm talking about. They took this, that was also a contributing structure, that garden house, with the attached greenhouse right to it. They took that and they made that a wing of a house that was then probably 3 or 4 times the size of the existing house. And I will tell you that I can't imagine the current Architectural Review Board, and Bo will correct me if I'm wrong, but he's has the benefit of the council there, feeling very comfortable with that approach.
In other words, you don't think they would do it again?
I don't think they'd do it again. And it was a different board, it was different members, a different mindset, probably some changes in the code, it's probably some different interpretations. So what?
The result wasn't great.
Excuse me?
The result wasn't great.
Well,
It's a nice little house.
reasonable minds can differ, but what happened was that structure became totally subsumed into a much larger house, and its separate character as...
You've done something like that just recently.
You've done something like this. You've done something like this.
You added onto a significant structure.
472.
You certainly know about that one.
Oh, no. You know what that was? That was a 5,000 square foot existing structure, and there was a 2,000 square foot addition.
Well, here you have a 3,900 square foot, and what if they added another 2,000 square feet? That was
Then it would be unfair to the owner and unfair to the applicant because
They
this...
want a larger house.
And I think, given the character of the neighborhood, it's very... There's big houses on Ox Pasture
How
Road.
large is this proposed house?
The proposed house is...
8,800 square feet.
It gets confusing. Sorry. The proposed house is 9,031 square feet.
Oh, that includes part of the garage?
Yes,
In other
9,000.
words, you have to add 5,000 square feet onto this house. That's what you're saying, which would be larger.
It would be
than the house.
larger than the house, and I will tell you, you'd only have to go to 1 or 2 ARB meetings when they don't like to see an addition to a contributing structure that is larger than the contributing structure itself.
I really can't imagine that.
But in any event, so that's what I think is the best proposal here, which is to take this existing house, and it's not, you've done it before, you did, and there's a similar application that was granted with about a year ago on Great Plains to the west of Cooper's Neck Lane. About the same square footage as two. That was a stucco house that was the principal residence. It was the old, part of the old, I'm going to butcher this name because I'm not good with foreign languages, the Mia Fiore house. It was the old, it looked like, it was on Cooper's Neck Lane. It looks like it's a knockoff of the Medici house in Rome. Very similar to that, and that was
Great Plains Road, wasn't
it was on.
You said
It was on. It was on Cooper's Neck.
It's on the corner.
Yeah, the gates. The gates are still there with the Oculus and the crosshatches in the middle. Yes, with the carriage house to it, or the guest house to it. So there's precedent for it, about the same size, and you'll notice if you go past there's a very large principal residence under construction now. So the whole idea is, instead of trying to bastardize this contributing structure by adding something that is just going to impact on this contributing structure, to make this contributing structure the guest house, move it forward. It would be a true guest house, so it could only be lived in by people who are connected, not a separate rental, and move it forward so it'll become more visible, and then create a house commensurate with the neighborhood, which is, there are plans before you, and in the location that is proposed, and we just think this is does much less damage to this contributing structure. We will what's the way? I want to make sure we'll renovate the existing structure and bring it forward at not a little cost. So that is the plan. Now, under the code section, it's 11628K. The procedure is for you to refer this to the Architectural Review Board. I did speak with the village attorney as this application was being made, and Wayne said, since you're going to go there anyway, just get it filed, and it is on for May 13th. But I do think we do need, either by resolution or something, and I would obviously love to have it before the 13th, your actual official referral to the Architectural Review Board for their review and comment on it.
You want us to refer it?
Refer it.
No decision.
No, I don't think you can make a decision without a referral under this very specific section. So I'd like you to refer it there to the ARB.
The idea of saving the house, I like the idea of moving the house. If it is a contributing structure, I'd like the input of the ARB about the location and, what they feel about
Yep.
this contributing house and how they feel it would affect the property. But I wouldn't have a problem granting it after that.
Just a couple of things. Yeah, and I think the code section actually says, it's K, I had it here, the application for such a variance, because really what I'm asking for is not only am I asking for certain, really as you know, a guest house, you can't have a guest house without this board either being pre-existing non-conforming or this board under some circumstances acting to allow it. So the application has to be referred to the Board of Architectural Review for its report for any determination. So we would need a relief for an accessory structure that's larger than 800 square feet, because it's going to be a guest house. We would need the relief under this code section 11628K for this to be a guest house. The house is taller than 16 feet. It's 38 and 9. I think
38 feet, 9
Taller than
inches.
35.
Yeah, it's more than 35, but it is existing. It's there. So And I think, it would be a pre-existing non-conforming structure, which would then we'd be asking to create into a pre-existing, into a use, a guest house use. I think it does.
It's also in front of the principal residence.
Sir, you must address the board.
I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah.
it's also in front of the
Well,
principal residence.
after you introduce yourself, sir.
Bruce Lifton,
All right.
for the application.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's also, as Bruce pointed out, it's and it's in the code section, it's in the application, it's a accessory use that is in front of the principal residence. Why did we do that? Because the whole idea is to bring it forward for better public view. And of course, the the ARB would probably create some conditions so that we couldn't say we're bringing this forward to have the public have a better view of it, and then put, 20-foot hedges in front of it. So I'm sure that's some of the stuff that we talked about, but.
So your argument is that the proximity to the main house sort of ensures that it's a guest house? Is that your argument, or am I making it for you?
I don't think it could
That
be
is, if
anything.
it's close,
Well,
if
I mean,
it's
you know,
further
you'd put-
away, it's more likely to be rented out. If it's close, it's going to be a
Yeah,
guest.
we could covenant that it would, I think you'd probably want a covenant that say it could only be used for guests and
Well,
staff and stuff like that of the main house.
Send the
That's pretty
enforcement.
typical.
Yeah, we would do that.
Sending
but
enforcement
That anyway.
for that, right? And just for, I'm sure the ARB, this is, the front of the house is fronting the street in your
Yes.
rendition.
Faces north. So we'd be moving that. That's what you would see, but closer.
Right.
And you still see that.
You'd still see that.
Now,
You'd see it,
You
the
have
public would
not
see it
been
better.
before the ARB for the new structure, the new house?
We're there for the whole
Yeah.
McGill, so to speak, on the
So,
13th.
I mean, if this is a contributing factor, they might want to make concessions to the new house. That's what I'm saying, the input.
No, I think it'll be important. The other thing I wanted to point out, though, even though this is in a zone where you don't add the square footage of an accessory structure for computing the GFA of the house, even though that it's not applicable in this zone, the combination of the house and what we propose to be the guest house is still under the GFA for the lot. So I thought that was helpful, too.
Fairly close.
By 7 feet or something.
No, by
Careful.
521 square feet smaller. The proposed house is 9,031, the cottage is 3,700, the allowable GFA is 13,252.
Right, I was looking at lot coverage.
We're looking at lot coverage.
Lot coverage.
You got 27 feet, don't make a mistake.
Don't make a mistake. Remember to tell that to your excavator, bro.
Make a
What we
mistake.
went through to get that right, because the shingle rollout was being counted, so we took square footage out of the garage to ensure that we were under.
But we haven't had too many mistakes lately come before us, I guess, but
No, that's not.
last year we had a lot.
So unless there are any questions, I would, and of course you'd have to see if the public has anything to say, I would just ask you to keep it open because we have to go to the ARB and see what they say. I think this is a superior way of tackling these things.
Any board questions? No? Any questions? Floor questions? Yes, sir. Please come on up and introduce yourself. Go to the microphone up top. Thank you.
My name is Morgan Grayson. I think Mr. Bennett has prepared an excellent plan. And I do have a question, and that is, if this house that currently exists, that we've seen a photograph of, is a contributing structure, which I understand it is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is, Morgan. Yeah.
Now, can you tell me what it is contributing to currently?
It's a contributing asset within the Southampton Village Historic District.
I see, so it's not a contributing structure to another structure, is that
There's,
correct?
the status in the historic district is that a structure is either contributing or it's not.
I see, to the
It is a
historic.
contributing structure, it is an historic asset.
I see.
It attains the status that the purpose of the statute is directed to. If it's not a contributing structure, then it has a lesser status.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, I didn't understand it. Now, can I get on to my second question?
Certainly.
That is, there were some concerns about the height of this contributing structure. And I happen to notice that, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that there's there's a porch that's elevated, and that goes up to the front entrance, I believe, to the main floor. And so the question is, could that height be, since it's slightly over the maximum height, could that height be reduced by, say, a yard or something, which might mitigate the issue of the house that's looming over the adjoining property? So I don't know what the measurements are. I'm not a registered architect, but that's simply a question.
Well, if I may, I just want to identify what the issue was. I'm not
Question
disputing
is,
it.
the accessory building is very tall. There is an elevation in the accessory building. Could that be reduced? Is that
That's
fair?
basically it.
Foundation, if the house is sitting on a foundation, it's 3 feet out of the ground. When you build a new foundation, you could build it a foot out of the ground, and by that, could lower the house 2 feet.
That assumes I'm allowed.
Excuse me?
That assumes I'm allowed.
Yeah.
Because when I read the contributing structure, things that they look at, one of the things they talk about is the foundation and how there were different types of blocking used. And my understanding is I'm supposed to replicate that.
So in other words, the thought is to bring the house.
When you're going to go before the ARB, this should be.
Yes, so the question becomes if I'm allowed. I'm not married to 38.9.
I just want to make sure, did you,
It's going to change the facade of the house. If you
Well,
let it.
it's 38.9. If they ended up, the foundation that sits on now is 3 feet out of the ground.
Yeah, you bring it down, but it's going to change the front of the house.
And the
Not the structure,
staircase.
And the staircase and all.
Staircase and the railings.
yeah, we'll change the facade. Yeah, whatever.
I'm not sure they let me do that, that's why.
That's an ARB question.
That's a valid point, ARB
We
question.
changed the
So
product.
you should go to ARB meetings and make yourself heard.
Okay.
So,
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no.
don't worry.
No.
They're just questions. I don't
Yeah, no, I understand.
think I'll ever oppose anything that you do, because I'm
Do you live
probably-
next door to this?
Yeah, I live next door, and I see
You
it
didn't,
currently.
I don't think you introduced that into the record.
Oh, well, I should. Yes, our property has a contiguous property line to it on both the west and the south. It's a long property line. And we see a great deal of this particular structure, and we'll be seeing a lot of the new structure that goes up.
Is the height of this building now offensive to you?
Well, frankly, that brings me to my third question.
And we're not here to basically answer
Yeah.
questions, but I know you're trying to make statements.
I know, I'm making statements. We don't really enjoy looking at it. And if it was lower and within the envelope permitted for building structures, that would be something we would like, if we could do that.
Now, if the house moved from where it is now, located on a property where you see it from your property, and it's moved to the new location, does it have more of an impact or less of an impact on you?
Well, that's a good question. I think probably it'll have less of an impact. You know, I think it's probably to our benefit to have it moved away from our house. So could I ask one more question?
Go ahead, these are easy anyway.
You got to put more money into the question.
It would help me if I could use your diagram.
Oh, sure, Mark.
Sorry for the
No,
delay.
no, don't be silly. It's,
Okay.
glad to resolve it.
I'd like to put it up so it can be seen on this. Turn it- Okay. If that helps at all. Okay. I suppose I should use a pencil here to point to this. Okay, great. So as you can see, this would be rectangular in its shape, except for this area here, which, our house being here, this area here has forsythia there, going back and forth. And so this is the way by which we see the existing house, which is right about here. Well,
It's in red.
it's in red, I'm sorry.
That's the existing house.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
don't mean to interrupt.
No, thank you for your help. Okay, so we see the existing house, and what I would like to suggest is that a hedge on this side of the property would be added to help shield the view, and it could be contiguous with a hedge that I restored some years ago, which was right here, which you can see that. If you go to the property, you can see a hedge on our side of the property. And if possible, we would like to see a hedge on the others, on our neighbor's side of the property, which would be north of our property, so that it would shield the new structure.
I think we have a planting plan that we're working on, correct?
It's not a hedge, and a hedge only, you can buy hedges up to 5-6 feet tall. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing back there yet, but I don't want my new home I'm gonna build to look at his home any more than he wants to look at mine.
Yeah.
So, nothing personal, I don't even know what your home looks like, quite frankly. But I don't know what I'm gonna put, I don't know what I'm gonna put there yet. I anticipate putting something taller than a hedge.
Great, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah, I anticipate putting something taller. Right now, we have a planting plan that shows evergreens behind the pool house, which I know you were concerned about, and so I added one more in my mind's eye so that you didn't see the pool house at all. But as far as the rest of the property line, I just don't know the answer. I don't know that a hedge will give us the privacy we need.
Probably you're correct, probably an evergreen.
That's and that's what I
Well, would be-
anticipate, but I don't know at this point.
Sure, I don't,
But yes, I'll definitely put one behind the pool house. I have no problem with that.
okay, great.
And as you mentioned, the pool house, is that 2 cabanas? Does that make up the pool house?
That, yeah, because we were lot coverage, so it's 2 cabanas connected by a trellis. We've done it before in the village and they approve it. It's considered one building, and it's about, the enclosed area is about 230 square feet.
So it's considered one building?
Yes.
Even if it wasn't, it would,
My understanding, and we've done it before, we did it on our old townhouse, the same pool house.
even if it wasn't, there's no limit on the number of accessory structures.
Well, at least nobody's going to be sleeping in the cabanas.
No, not 250 feet between the 2 of them.
And so there's only one other point you've already, I've discussed it with me, and that is these telephone poles that are to the west side, which there are several telephone poles to the west side. That is our gravel driveway.
What we had talked about, and
Yeah.
I think you spoke to Mr. Lifton as well, there are currently there's a utility pole that is in the area just a little bit to the west of the Grace's driveway. And that actually gives power to the existing house. I think and to the Grace house, and I think actually to another house. Our intention is to come in with the utilities for both the accessory structure and the main house from Ox Pasture Road, and we will do that unless for some reason the utilities tell us we can't. I can't say that we'll terminate the use here if I'm showing my age here, Lilco, because what do they call them now?
Loco?
Lipa.
Red PS&G for
If the utilities insist that remain, I can't do anything about it,
But
but
you would go underground from that pole anyway.
we are underground from this pole, anyway, yeah.
Yes.
And we go underneath,
But under this scenario, we'd be moving the house, so that whole run becomes useless. We would have to start again. And to me, I can't see any reason we wouldn't be going from the street unless PSE&G says, no, you have to go, I just learned it, I would have said LIPA. Unless they say you have to go from there, in which case, obviously, it's beyond my control. But our goal would be to go from the street.
But you're going to come back with this stuff, anyway, for us.
Could I make one point about PSE&G? The comment that I'm going to make has to do with what happens during hurricanes. And PSE&G has a can, what do you call it, a transformer?
Sir, I don't mean to interrupt you, but does this have anything to do with the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and
Well, you can contact Mr. Lipton anytime you want in order
Yeah.
to discuss this, but I don't really think it's
okay,
a matter that the board is going to have to decide on here.
fine. I just want to say one comment, and then I'll be out of your way. John is also my attorney, but I didn't want
You're at a
to...
public hearing for,
If you make it very quickly.
Okay, basically, that transformer is not accessible to PSE&G when the power is down because our gate is locked shut. And all of the houses that get served by that transformer are out of power, and they risk having their pipes freeze in the wintertime when they're not here. So
Okay.
that'll end my comment.
I'm sure Mr. Lifton will take care of that.
May I?
Yes, you may. Please introduce yourself.
Nika Strunk, Nika B. Strunk PLLC, 37 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York. My client is Mary Ann Ty, who's on the next application. She's also directly adjoining this application on the east, and I spoke to her about it. Mr. Bennett's office emailed me all of the plans and specifications, and I reviewed them with her, and she has no objection whatsoever to this application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nika.
So, we need to refer to the ARB. How do we do that?
Wayne will draft a letter
Okay.
to the board for reference.
And just, we're on for the 13th of May, so we'll be, if we could, somehow that could get there. Just, I want to make sure, there was one time I was watching it unfold and there hadn't been an official referral, and it got a little confusing, so you could just have an official referral.
A motion to authorize village attorney to write a letter of referral of this application to the Board of Appeals.
So moved.
Thank you, Bob.
Is there a second on that
Second.
there? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a nice evening.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
To the ARB.
Good job, Mark.
To the ARB we go.
Off we go.
Next, new case, number 3038, Red Maples.
I'll give you what you need in terms of I have the affidavits and the architect. Thank you.
Accessory buildings from. Oh, the Follies.
This is the Folly.
Follies.
I'm gonna show this one if the screen will capture it. This is 261 Great Plains Road. Again, Nika Strunk, 37 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York. My client is Red Maples LLC, which is the owner of this parcel in front of you. It's at 261 Great Plains Road. It's a 2-acre parcel of property, and Mary Ann Ty is the principal of the LLC that owns it. She's also the owner of property that adjoins it on its north side, which is 222 and 250 Ox Pasture Road. She's the beneficial owner of those. They're in LLC form as well. This is a single and separate lot. It's not connected or merged in any way with those other parcels. However, she and her family live next door. She's acquired this property, and she would like to essentially transform it into a very, very beautiful and extensive garden for her own personal use. And we have tonight with me the design team. Quincy Hammond is the landscape architect, and Voorhees and Sheeran are the architects on this. Essentially, this is a garden, and like many classical gardens of really significant scope, it has some structures within it, or we're proposing some structures within it. And the main thing that is presented to you is something called a folly, which is a fanciful structure. It's about 250 square foot in footprint. 200, no, I'm sorry. Is that correct? 225 square feet in footprint. It's before you because there's two nonconformities. Number one, it is an accessory structure without a primary structure on the same lot. The primary structure is on an adjacent lot. And number two, it is taller than allowed for an accessory structure.
How high is it?
35 feet. And the design of that is something that our design team is going to speak to. The purpose of this this structure is it's going to be a potting shed on the ground floor. a very small reading room. We're talking about small spaces. No heating, no conditioning, no bathroom, no anything. It's really a object of contemplation and an object to be in and contemplate essentially the garden. In the scope of this neighborhood, and the design team again will show you some illustrations, it's really minimal compared to what could be developed here as of right. It's something that is going to be for the personal enjoyment of Ms. Ty and her family, and I have spoken to her about what I imagined would be the board's concerns about creating an accessory structure, albeit one that is completely uninhabitable under any circumstances, and without having a primary structure on the main lot. And I thought that there could be concern about if she were ever to sell it independently, so that when she wasn't living there anymore, she said she would be willing to commit to demolishing it in that case. So any concerns about that, I think, would be addressed that way.
Why is there no primary structure here?
She feels no need to have a home on this property. She wants to develop this property as a garden.
She's not going to live here?
She lives next door.
So it's going to read as one lot, but she's keeping it as two separate lots.
Yes. Very important to her to keep them single and separate. Yes.
In the past, we've granted an accessory structure on a separate piece of property, but it was for like a greenhouse, which was like an ancillary use to the garden work. And so like a potting shed, and it was 16 feet high, it was below 16 feet high.
Okay.
You're asking for above 16 feet high, but you're asking for also a secondary use besides the potting shed, which it's not ancillary to gardening, is a reading room, which I don't know what that is for. You can read outside on a bench, but I mean.
It might be raining.
I'll tell you, this is and the design team, we were talking about this before we came here this evening. It's a focal point for the garden. The garden here is magnificent. I mean, it's already magnificent, and it's going to be even more magnificent. And just a little bit of the history is that this property and the two adjoining properties were part of the Red Maples estate, and that actually the foundation for the Red Maples estate is still on the property, and you can see its outlines on this plan and on the survey. Some of the foundation is still there. I believe the building was destroyed by fire, but that has been the inspiration for both the properties at 250 and I think it's 222 Ox Pasture, okay. As well as this garden is designed really to pay homage to that structure. And as far as the second floor of this folly, my client really would like a place to contemplate the garden from. I should say also that the neighbors, who are Siamak and Angela Sammy, have submitted a letter. I don't know if you have a copy of it. I have several copies with me that I can hand. You do? Okay, good. And Cornelia Bostwick is the other neighbor, also has absolutely no objection to this whatsoever. They're very pleased with this proposal. So you can't see anything from this folly from the second floor except the garden. I think Ms. Ty foresees reading garden books in this space, and really it's a place for her to enjoy her garden, and it's a fanciful object within a garden, which is there's a precedent for that in gardens of this scope and significance.
You're asking us to bypass two very significant hurdles. One, accessory building all by itself, no primary residence. And two, the height.
I understand.
You understand that?
I do,
You understand
yes.
how many people will be lining up to get this if we approve it?
Well, I
They'll be
don't.
lined up outside the door. For
To have a
accessory structures, 20 feet high, 30 feet high. This is a tough one.
And they'll go from follies to garages and whatnot.
And that's what my point was, we've done this in the past when it was an ancillary use to the garden, which would be a potting shed or a little greenhouse
Well, this
or
is fine if it
something,
was
you know,
16
but
feet.
once you get beyond that, which is now a reading room and I don't know.
That was like a
over
9-acre lot too, wasn't it? It was a huge piece
Yeah.
of property.
Yeah.
This is 2 acres and, you know, in the context, and well, in a moment, I'll show you some design so you can see really how, I understand your concern about the height. For a 225 square foot footprint, I don't know how many people are really going to be looking for something like that. This is quite unique to this particular garden design. I mean, of course, I'm sensitive to your concerns. But, you know, I don't think, I think the design team really has to speak to the need for the height. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like them to speak.
How many stories is this? 2 stories?
2 stories, 2 stories.
So there'll be, what would the first story be?
The first story is a potting shed.
Now, how tall is it?
12.
12
feet.
So it's a 12 and, no, 2 stories, so the next story is going to be 23 feet?
I'm going to introduce.
35 feet, you're right.
We have a 35 feet.
35 feet. And you say they should be reading garden books. How do we know there's going to be a dice game up there? Card game.
Look, it's 225 square feet. I'm not sure how much
Let
you
me
can
just
do there.
clarify, were you covenanting that if the property is sold and/or there's a primary structure proposed, that this would be demolished?
Well, if there were a primary structure proposed, I don't think it should necessarily be demolished, because I think this could be an accessory structure to a house on this same lot if someone in the future were to want to do that. That's not what my client wants to do. But if that
If they
wasn't,
built the primary structure, they could incorporate it into the structure that's built on the property, meeting
That
code.
eliminates the nonconformity.
it would
Well,
have,
not really, because it would still be an accessory structure that would be too tall.
unless it was joined, unless it was attached,
Right,
which I can't
Well,
really
it
foresee that.
eliminates the one,
right.
and then you've got the height issue.
Yes. So, we were going to have Quincy speak about the garden design, and the architect's board, Boris and Sheeran speak about the folly design. Are you more interested in the height issue and the folly to begin with?
I am.
Okay, why don't we
So
do
we
that?
come up and we'll
Why don't- why
present
don't you-
together
why
as
don't
a
you
group.
folks come and talk about that?
I'm James Sharon, and this is Dick Boris, for the architect, Boris and Sharon. And let's see, what's the best way? It's from up above that we're doing this? Are they?
Presenting it to them
this way, yeah. Or do you want to see them, how do you want to see them?
Oh, you know what? There's also those additional packets to hand.
We just did.
You did?
This is
Okay, good.
That's showing up nicely, right? Looking over there. Okay, well. Okay.
No, this one's right on the...
So the remaining section of the first floor and second floor that you described as the 10 and 12 is the roof. The roof is not accessible. The dormer only brings light into the reading room. So there's no way to get up there to act as a third floor in any way. It's simply a dormer. The views from the garden are only internal into the property. There are no way to look at the neighbors in any other way except out into your garden, right and left. Let me tell you about it.
Do the balconies, can you walk out on those balconies?
There is one balcony on the front over the door facing inward into the garden.
Okay. Please help me out with the sundial on the wall. Does that work?
It does. Yeah, Quincy, who is the landscape architect, who we've been looking at mapping the sun and haven't worked out all the details of it, but it's also a classical element in 18th century follies, of which that's what the reference here is. Quincy's garden, which is sort of falling into the great tradition estate gardens of Southampton or in all the Hamptons in general, and then the idea of a folly, of which actually there is precedent in Long Island and in Southampton of follies, particularly your Cobb Lane one, which was, unlike many windmill kind of houses or follies that you've had, Cobb Lane was built as a folly. It's probably taller than ours is now, at least from what we can see, without measuring it, and it was built as a folly. Then there was the former parish house that had, this was never a windmill, this was also built as a folly, an estate folly, garden for pleasure, for viewing. And then there's a...
Cobb Road wasn't a windmill?
No, not at that height.
It wasn't a windmill.
Yeah. It was built by the architect in 1902.
Well, it was probably an observation tower, because in those days, there was nothing taller out there than a potato plant.
Yes, yeah. But definitely meant to be, it's aesthetically pleasing. It's meant to be part of the estate. And I think they have to be done on the right property. I mean, we have diagrams of the pyramid, what you can see, and the building falls within the pyramid completely. Pardon me?
The other two from Long Island?
Oh, and then also, excuse me, and then just, falling into tradition of Long Island estates. Wheatley, farther west, also had a tower. Meriwether Post Estate, that one still exists. So we hope that we're seeing that we are following in the tradition of estate gardens and follies in the Hamptons.
And
in
also,
Southampton.
to speak to your point about the engagement of the building with the garden itself, we have several elements in addition to the sundial that really speak to the purpose of the building as an element of the garden overall. We have this trellis that goes up the back, covers the back wall, that will have vines growing on it. We have a weather vane on top of the building. We have, of course, the balcony that looks out into the garden. It's very much meant to be associated with the garden.
As you know, there's no bathroom in it.
No bathroom.
There's no heat.
Why is there a chimney?
One sink.
There's a fireplace. The only way to warm it is by
There's a
that.
fireplace.
Yeah.
First floor, second floor?
Second floor.
Both?
Just second floor.
So the reading room has a fireplace?
Yes. I mean, you couldn't, and I think if...
The sink of the potting shed is attached to the irrigation system, so it would not be winterized. It would be blown out for the winter.
And you probably have this diagram of that we're falling within the pyramid. Wherever you view it from any position, it can't be seen. And then we have further diagrams of the landscape that's existing and the landscape that Quincy has actually already installed to date, showing I'm sure you have smaller versions of this, but the scale of the existing trees and the trees that Quincy is planting right as we speak, so to speak.
Actually, they're planted.
Right.
Yeah.
We're making great efforts to preserve the original landscape that was part of the Red Maples estate from the early 1900s. There are several large trees that we've very carefully preserved, and we're bringing in new screening trees along the western property line for the benefit of our neighbors. And as Nika mentioned, we have full support of our neighbors. And we're also bringing in some smaller ornamental trees. They're still quite large, that will surround the building. And I think this three-dimensional view shows how the folly is completely ensconced within garden.
Did you ever design a demi folly?
What do you mean? Oh.
I think the problem with that, with the landscape that Quincy's laid out, which is one of the things we're discussing in the office earlier today, like the Washington Monument on the Mall, it's scaled to the open space so that in the garden that Quincy's created, in terms of this size of the reflecting pool, the size of the open lawn, all those things are of a grand scale because of the nature of the area that it's in, an ox pasture, and the scale of the houses. And then whatever building might be there, a folly, which the standard term in a garden's folly, needs to be sort of commensurate with the open space. If it was sort of a, like if this were your open space and the building with little, it wouldn't have any effect on anything. There wouldn't be a scale relationship for the play of balance of the open to closed. It wouldn't do anything.
Could you also point out the original tree lines there that were quite significant around the property?
These, what do you mean?
Yeah, the ones that
the
we're
large
preserving.
lindens and, okay, yes.
From the original estate,
Mhm.
which are quite tall.
Right. Well, and I
One of
also,
the problems is that I don't think we've ever granted a 35-foot accessory building on a piece of property with a primary structure. So you're asking for a 35 building on a piece of property that doesn't have a primary structure, so it's a complicated, difficult stretch for us.
It's ironic because it's far less than what could ever be there. So in other words, it's this great, like, wow,
Yeah, you
all we
could
got was the
build an
skinniest
8,000
house.
square foot house there.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
all the neighbors are thrilled. They're like, oh my God, there's no big house there. Fantastic. And if ever the future came, first person would do would be, tear this down and build a big house. So
But
for
it's
whatever long period of
But it's
time that
also
is,
positioned within the primary setback, so it could be added to a future house.
it would
So
just
it wouldn't have to be
become
torn down.
like any
So
other.
that- So that's why we put it farther in from the accessory setback, so you could incorporate it into another house.
As you know, you have many, many houses in the village of Southampton that have towers attached to them, like on Gin Lane, and where there are all kinds of tower-esque houses. So if that was its future 20, 30, whatever years from now, then it would be typical, even more. Here, it's just, I guess, the great gift that there's no big house there.
Could you speak a little bit to, you're entering in off of Great Plains?
off of Great Plains.
But do you have parking? Let's say somebody pulls in from Great Plains, where are they going?
Where's the plan? It's sort of buried under here, I guess. I think it's
The
here.
green one?
The intent of the driveway is really only to serve as access for this portion of there's not going to be parking per se. I mean, a truck might pull in and park temporarily, but it's really meant only to be access to the back of the 250 property and this property in case there were something like maybe a truck comes to prune these big trees with a bucket truck kind of thing.
And I should add that this property, 261 Great Plains Road, is already, there's an easement in place, pre-existing, that benefits the two parcels on Ox Pasture. That the two parcels on Ox Pasture have had the benefit of that easement for many years. I don't know exactly how long, but for a long time.
How would we feel about this if they were putting up a windmill, I wonder?
Which is, we certainly, you can imagine when we did our research, windmills were endless, and then there were all the 19th century houses, people that attached themselves to windmills or brought windmills to their property. And we were surprised to find the Cobb Lane one so close, that actually literally identical to what we're doing happening on Cobb Lane. Then certainly,
Except I think smaller, probably.
You have a map that shows,
ours is smaller.
a little better map that shows how the garden property integrates with the principal property? Yeah,
No,
I
we
got
don't.
bits and pieces here, but it does, I see
Probably
little roads going in, and then I see,
Here, can you see it?
Can you see from here? Well, yeah, there is a main house.
Yes.
This is probably, I mean, we can certainly provide something if the board, that would be helpful.
It's really in terms of its integration, it's a sort of a clean sweep. I think.
so your principal house is where?
Well, on the neighboring property, yeah.
There, that's the principal property.
This is Ox
Yes.
But
Pasture.
you see on the back property, those little roads in the back, where are those coming from?
Those are not roads, those are paths.
Just garden
walking,
paths.
just
Those are access.
just walking paths.
From what property?
That's they're on the Great Plains property, on the subject property that we're talking about, but they're just walking paths.
I understand, but,
It
so,
would be along here.
Yes.
on that one, the red, isn't that the property?
Yes.
Just
And-
the red?
No, that's the principal
That's the
building
principal
envelope.
setback, so that's inside.
We're
That's the
showing you
That's
how,
accessory.
Oh, okay, so the
Sorry.
property is the whole gray square?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are the,
Okay.
Sorry,
the yellow is
sorry.
the accessory building
We're color
envelope,
coding the
and
setbacks.
the red is the primary building envelope.
It shows that it's inside both.
well inside.
Yeah, and
So that little path goes down this flag road to somewhere.
Not really.
The little path here, this little path is going, where,
It goes to,
No, well, we're
Great Plains.
preserving, there's a driveway, an access drive from Great Plains that we're preserving, the
Right.
flag. And that is, again, it's really just for service access. It's not intended for parking or, I don't know, it's really just intended to service access the 250 and 222 properties and of course this property. But then that driveway is designed in such a way at a certain point when you come into the major portion of the
and
property.
this piece of property is not your property?
No, this is not. This
Okay.
does
This
not
is
belong.
Bostwick, right?
No, Bostwick is over here.
okay.
This is Lopez Balboa.
So that's just a little flag road out to...
Right, to Great Plains, that's right. But the driveway is then designed to be a more intimate scale for walking. We just want it to be a garden for walking around. It's more of a naturalized design. You asked about the other 250 property. It's a much more formal layout. And here we intend to keep a much more naturalistic
Now,
feel.
is this garden going to need a lot of maintenance?
No, the idea is not to add on substantially to the maintenance
So all
because
you'll do is mow lawns here?
we mow lawns, but we also have, like I say, a more formal, and on the 250 property, we have formal hedges and things. Here, we're not doing that. We're keeping a lot of the existing trees, and we're adding new trees, and it will just
So it's not a garden in the sense of flowers and roses, it's a garden in the sense of trees and
More
shrubs?
naturalistic, like
Yeah, more
Central Park,
naturalistic.
I guess you
Yeah.
could say. You know, Olmsted, more, that's why the kind
like
of...
woodland, a woodland type garden.
yeah.
I
That's
think
why
is
it's
a
so
better-
hidden as it is already.
With paths, simple paths going through and benches and things like that.
And the folly views, the sort of open lawn at the very, very center of it.
There's a little bit of lawn at the center, yes. But
How
we're
deep
trying to
is the
keep that
reflecting
minimum.
pool?
It's maximum 24 inches.
The stairs, I see a stairway that's, I don't know, 10 stairs, rather than...
It's eight stairs, but they're 4-inch risers, so it's a shallow stair. It's only a 30-inch, 32-inch.
Go around that pool area somewhere, or what?
No, the pool area is at a lower level than the stairs. The stairs go up, this is the existing foundation wall from the old estate, and so those stairs go up to that level.
Oh, that's a raised level, like an Esplanade type thing or something?
Yes, it's,
Building the
the foundation is up at a higher elevation. This portion of the wall was demolished at a certain point, so we would be reestablishing that and then adding this stair to
It's
kind of
basically a-
accentuate this
plateau.
idea that there was an old historic foundation there.
and also these other stairs are still there, but have
Those
to be
are
rebuilt.
still there, we're just,
1, 2, 3, 4.
right, we're keeping those and
They're
just
from
repairing them.
Yeah,
The
they're there.
original
Yeah.
site?
Yeah.
Right.
It's quite impressive, it's just the height bothers us, I guess, and these other critters that are gonna come behind and want 12-car garages that are 30-some feet.
Would our, I mean, obviously I realize it goes against that precedent, but we're so tiny. It's like this great big piece of property with just a pencil in the middle of it, you know?
Right.
A point with a pointed top. And I realize that,
It bumps up against a lot of our zoning regulations is the problem.
It's just one of them, right, or two? Two.
Actually, and then usage too, you know?
Sometimes I can only find one.
What do you mean, this is one? One
Just
structure?
one structure. I mean, there, apart
It's an
from-
accessory structure and it's too high.
Right,
Oh, right,
those
okay,
are the two
two varied,
non-conformities.
yes, sorry.
I'm looking at the buildings, yeah.
I thought you meant two buildings.
We don't need a fire escape, do we?
So, but the intent really is that the owner is going to come from the north
That's correct.
and walk back.
That's correct.
Yes.
the visual axes, up
There's no-
this stair
there's
to
no real
that is
division between.
is
No,
all
there is
directed
no
to the
division.
main house.
At this point, yeah.
And then it, shielded this way, opening through that way to the main house.
you'd be willing to covenant to knock it down in case of any addition. You might want to build a pool here someday, or a tennis court or stuff.
Is there any reason why they didn't, or she doesn't want to join the property and eliminate one of the conditions?
A lot of reasons there.
Yeah.
A lot of
There
reasons.
are.
Yeah.
10 million of them.
Thanks, Bob.
Because if they wanted to build a structure on it, they could also subdivide it again, you know, so.
I mean,
Yeah.
The covenant would be to the effect, I've lost my train of thought, sorry.
Well, your
about-
question was about
If it was
tennis,
sold.
pool.
Any other addition.
well,
Yeah,
actually.
the
that's a
covenant is the
question.
effect that granting of this is, would, the owner or the applicant is waiving any rights to use this as a justification for another variance.
Right.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
On this particular piece of
By
property?
granting any, if the board grants either or both of these variances, the covenant would be to the effect, part of the covenant, is that the owner is waiving the future right to assert that a further variance should be granted on this property because you granted this. In other words, it's a
Okay.
precedent.
They want to
waiver.
add to the building. or
If
something.
we grant this, well, now you granted this, now we want the pool. No.
Oh, it's like a
No,
stepping stone
right.
kind of thing.
No, I don't think that's
No,
a problem.
There is
at
a
all.
pool on this property?
There's a
reflecting-
pool on the 222 property. This is a decorative reflecting pool.
Like a skinny bit.
Which is an
Yeah.
It's going to be
accessory
building, it's
structure.
not there now?
They have a
We
permit
would
for
be
that?
building. Yes,
That's
sir.
part of what,
Capture algae.
that's part of the request.
So that's three
Is
variances.
that have you asked for that?
Do they have to?
I'm not sure.
I mean, they would have to ask for that too, right?
Because it needs to be fenced off
It's-
also.
Yeah.
I mean,
A 2-footer?
If it's 2 feet,
I don't
my
think there's
understanding
any
is that it
depth on a
doesn't.
You don't have that in your application though, do you? For the
Yes.
pool?
That's not a
I-
pool.
I'm not
believe we do.
sure.
We
Hold
have
on.
an accessory water feature
Accessory water feature
thing in the
law.
code, I think.
Right.
I know, I can tell you, I don't, if it's
Something
not-
about that, because it's analogous to a fish pond. The only thing difference with this is there's no fish in it at the moment.
I don't know.
Koi pond.
Core, right, nothing.
It's in the
Well,
description.
but I'm saying it's the same
The
structure.
reflecting pool is in the
If
description.
you build a pond,
It's kind of a
And the moon
structure.
gates.
Yeah.
does it have a
we're concerned
filtering
it's a
system?
variance request.
Yes, of course. Yes, sir.
It does. It's
I-
not an algae pond.
We're concerned it might be
I
a
mean, in
variance
the
request
narrative, I
that they
did talk
didn't
about
request.
2 moon gates, reflecting pool, and a 2-story decorative garden folly.
Yes.
So those are encompassed by the request for the variance.
Say that again, Nika.
In the narrative, I listed 2 moon gates, which you have here, a reflecting pool, and a 2-story decorative garden folly. So the request applies to all of those structures.
Does the survey show
Doesn't
where
say
the
it on
Yes.
survey, not
Yes.
the depiction?
Yes, it does.
Is it in the advertisement?
Well, the advertisement is on the envelope.
Doesn't say.
It doesn't say it.
It doesn't, I don't know if you've applied for that.
And what's the square area of the pool?
It's 8 feet by 40 feet, so that's 320.
That's it.
2 feet deep?
2 feet deep.
Give it back to Lynn.
I mean, I can amend that if that's something that
We
needs
just
to
have
be.
to check the code. I'm just trying to recollect that off the top of my head, and I think there's something in the code about a body of artificial water feature like
If they have a water feature like that, and it's, you know, like a swimming pool, you have to have 4-foot fence, you have to have gates,
Yeah, I
you
know.
have to have, would that apply to this also?
Who's going to swim in it? Frogs.
I know, but it's a 2-foot deep pool.
The question
I
is-
don't
Fall
mind.
and drown.
I thought with the cut.
Rob, the question is not whether you can swim in it, the question is whether you can drown in it.
Yeah.
Well, no buckets either.
Um,
But you're going to have a 4-foot fence over an architected reflecting pool, you know? I mean,
Well, they could
Say
fence the whole
outside.
property,
I think, right.
You can fence the whole
I
property.
thought that
Okay.
was,
but then you'd have to have gates and everything, so then you'd have to,
You mean gates at this
the entry.
level, or at this level? Yeah.
and they would have to be pool compliant gates.
Well, what's the minimum depth of a photo feature that doesn't need a fence?
I thought it was 24
Okay.
inches.
We'd make it
Yeah.
whatever that was.
I thought,
we
I
can
looked
make
it
it,
up.
Well,
we can
let's
make it
look at the
workshop.
code. We
Before I
don't
did
know.
that.
Has the fire department looked at this? What happens if somebody's on the second floor, the thing catches on fire, and they have to get a truck in
We
there?
did
We
look at
met
that.
with,
yeah.
with Chris
there's a
Talbot,
fireplace, you could.
and
Yeah,
I don't think he had an issue with that.
I don't think Chris Talbot is
The
not,
one.
It's Dean McNamara.
it's Dean
All right,
McNamara.
well then.
You need to talk to
I
him.
can certainly speak to him.
So we have,
We have a fair list of.
we have research to do on the reflecting pool.
Are there any other aspects of the architectural portion of the building that, other than your, pondering it, that you need further description of? Or
I think you
We
should
don't do
do
architecture for one thing.
Yeah,
so-
you know, there's 2 cases before this, they wanted a garage that was over 16 feet. So,
I think you need to address a little bit more of the justification for the height. I mean, what's the difference between 25 feet and 35
Proportion.
feet?
Once we chose
Yeah, but what's
the,
what's it in reference, what's the scale in reference to?
to itself and to the garden, as we were
Can
talking
you
earlier.
scale it to yourself?
Yeah. I mean, there are ideal proportions,
How tall is the
like
lady?
it's, runway model looks great.
Well, we know
For certain
scale, we know
reasons.
scale
So-
refers to reference to the human body, but I mean, this is a standalone building,
Same with
so
architecture, yeah. So
I
I'm
think
saying-
you need to build that out, because as to, again, the board may say, well, even if they grant a variance, why does it have to be 35 feet? If you're standing
About
on
the
a
proportion.
12-foot ceiling garden potting shed, which is, seems to me unreasonably high, your feet are 12 feet off the ground, right? If the-
Above
if
the
the-
potting shed.
Well, if the ceiling of the potting shed is 11 feet, you're standing 12 feet off the ground, and you've got a 23-foot ceiling.
And then you tell me that
Up
this
to
is
the
a sort of a tree
crown of-
garden.
So the
why do
issue
we
would
need a
be,
potting
what
shed?
about, if you're there, and you're 12, your feet are 12 feet off the ground.
In the reading.
In the second
Right,
floor.
right, right.
I'm sorry.
So the question is, why does one need a 23-foot ceiling?
None of it is
if your-
need,
if your-
it's
if your
about
level of your-
proportion
Let me
and
finish.
design.
If your level of your feet hasn't changed. I'm just saying.
Need the height of the roof.
Yeah. Did you follow that?
No, I'm sorry.
So are you talking about from the
Let
interior?
me finish. Okay. This lady said that the height of the, or you did, that the potting shed ceiling, was it 10 feet or 12? I think it was, call it 10. So you're standing on the second floor, your feet are 11 feet off the ground.
Yes.
So the board's going to want to know, why do you have to have a 23-foot ceiling if it's not going to change the height of your feet above the ground? So they're saying, like you heard earlier with the cars, why did that applicant need a 31 feet, was it, garage? 31-foot garage?
It was 23.
23-foot garage when you're storing a car that's not even 5 feet tall.
I think that you're.
You don't need to do it now, you need to get something in writing to the
Okay.
board to justify this, because they're serious about this as to the precedent that this would set.
Thank you.
And
I can't, from what you're saying, determine why the height of the ceiling is that critical if you want a reading room.
I think
That's
it's the,
internal, you're probably talking
Yes.
about.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, it's all
external
based on
scale.
the, if it's 15 feet, and then you
We
think, what's
understand
the ideal
we
proportion
understand the
going up?
scale and
It'd
the
be like-
proportion issue, but that may not carry the day. So if you don't wish to address the issue that I raised further, feel free not to. But I'm just
No, we
saying,
do.
these people have to justify this in the village attorney's office legally.
right.
And proportion is not a criterion of the zoning code. That's the ARB, you'll deal with that at some point in time, but at the matter, there's no part of Village Law 7712 that talks about proportion.
What about
The other issue is that, back to what I was saying, is that you're calling that a potting shed, but then you call this like a tree and lawn area. What are you potting, you know? So it's like, are we just calling it a potting shed so you can get the building? Or is it actually going to have a functional use?
Well, yeah, well, because there's a garden adjacent, so there is a reason to be in
The
there.
garden adjacent, you mean on the other property?
All around it, it's
All of it
surrounded
is
by garden
garden.
elements to be,
But there could be flowers
I mean, there
on the
are
balcony.
trees, but then there's extensive
flowers.
underplanting beneath the
underplantings,
trees.
small, all kinds of things you go in
Right,
there.
well,
to be-
that's-
Yeah. Exactly.
Would you like more information on that?
Yeah, on the use and design, I guess, of this potting shed. And like I said, in the past, I think on accessory piece of property, we've granted a greenhouse because it was a 9-acre piece of property and they had gardens, and a greenhouse was a use to the gardens. Potting shed is a use to the gardens of this. The reading room and the height, we're having a problem with.
There's electric in the building, right?
Yes.
I know.
Oil lamp.
And a fireplace that we don't need in a potting shed.
On the second floor.
Well, there's no heat
Yeah.
for reading.
So you know your assignment? Are you
Yes, thank you.
requesting the board
Thank you.
adjourn the
Thank you.
matter until you can provide that?
And you're including the reflecting pool, right?
I mean, I can,
Do some research.
you think as to whether the application needs to be amended to
Yes.
for
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Okay, so you're requesting adjournment. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I move we adjourn this for all
No, you
purposes.
move, you
at
accept
the
the
request
applicant's
of the
request.
applicant.
We did. We moved to accept the
I second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm doing that now. I am going to do adjournment.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, you did. Sorry, I hear what you're saying now.
Oh, those are...
Reopen the meeting.
What is,
We didn't formally accept the adjournments that were requested.
oh, okay.
Approve.
So opening the hearing for the moment, is there a motion to adjourn
No,
accept
approve the applicant's
adjournment-
re- approve the applicant's request to adjourn.
3012 and 3026.
So moved.
Second.
Approve the applicant's request to adjourn, right.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Kevin, can you raise my bag behind your seat?
Oh, sorry about that, Dan.
What?
I have a
Drag it
brick in
down.
your seat to my bag.
Would you throw down 3032, please?
Got it?
Throw?
Yeah, hurl it in there.